it's lovely to have you here. It feels great to host you all in this first edition of Techtonix, the signature tech talks of Matrix Partners India. From the Matrix team, I have with me Jyoth, who is from our investment team looking at investments in technology and SaaS. And I have Devleena, who's a director with our human capital team. And many of you already know her from working with her on a regular basis. She drives the Matrix portfolio of human capital operations and technology assets for us.
Thank you, Rashmi. Hello, everyone. And great to have you here today in the first edition of Techtonix from different part of the world. Well, in recent past, I had discussions with many of you to understand the top 3 technology issues you want to solve this year for your respective organizations. Apparently, data security and compliance automation came out as a collective favorite one. So we thought to begin the Techtonix with that. Be it SaaS or consumer business, compliance is essential to make your organization belong in the community. I'm sure quite a few of you already here went through this journey and agree to the fact that without a compliance function, you cannot reliably build or maintain trust with your 360-degree stakeholders. It invites reputational damage, and in the longer run, it might not be workable. So it basically helps to define and regulate the why and how of your business, which in turn drives innovation and enhances consistency. Here, I would like to invite Saket, the founder and CEO of Onnivation, who had been instrumental and collaborative to work on this event with Matrix. He will give us a quick sneak peek in Drata, being an investor in the company and their India partner. Over to you, Saket.
This usually becomes an obvious bottleneck that's going to be just more than an annoyance. And the best part is it's not only limited to industry or scale. Everyone needs to have security and compliance. And that's why Drata comes in and they automate the entire journey, solving 2 major problems. One is it helps you get compliant really fast. And once you're compliant, they make sure you're compliant throughout the year. So the next year, you don't have to make that effort. So allowing companies across industries and sizes to streamline compliance from monitoring to evidence collection, we felt is a very valuable problem to solve that saves a lot of time to customers and engineering teams in India. So it has been a great journey, and I've been really excited.
It's my privilege to introduce you to our distinguished panel for this evening. Mr. Daniel Marashlien, the CTO and co-founder of Drata, the biggest unicorn in compliance in the minimum time frame of 10 months from its inception. Daniel is a technologist, serial entrepreneur, and investor. He had been the co-founder and CTO of multiple prominent startups like Portfolium, RapidEngage, and Plixi. He is also the board member and technical advisory of California National University. Next, we have Mr. Yashwanth Kumar, Chief Information Security Officer and co-founder of MoEngage, another potential next Indian unicorn towards insight-led customer engagement platform from Matrix portfolios. Yash has always been a technology enthusiast after his IIT days and founded People Tech Venture before MoEngage. Our prestigious third panel today is Mr. Jay Thomas, VP of IT Infrastructure and Operation at Daily Hunt and Josh, the Indian unicorn and Matrix portfolio to deliver vernacular news, contents, short videos to millions of his customers. I'm excited. I hope you are also. Welcome to Techtonix, Daniel, Yash, and Jay. Let's begin then.
I can share a few pointers around how our journey was towards some of the compliances that we have achieved and why the compliance was so important for us and for our customers. So just a little bit about MoEngage. So what we are is an insights-led marketing automation platform. So where we help the internet companies out there to send the personalized messages to their end users, right? So whatever you need to automate this entire process, we are there for you, right? So to do all these things, we first track our customer data. We ask our customers to send their, I would say, end users data to our platform. So which implicitly means that we are responsible for our customers' data. And then I think what Daniel quoted, I can relate to him. I initially few years ago of MoEngage, I used to fill all the IT questionnaire, security questionnaire that comes with. I still remember the 127 questions list I used to get, where I used to spend around at least a day to actually answer them, some of them honestly, and some of them, yes, where we have something in roadmap where we used to definitely go and achieve them. But I could relate to that pain, and each of the questions were different actually. So some of them are same. The answers they sought were same, but questions framing was different. So that's where I felt the pain that, okay, what if I had a ISO certification, or what if I had a SOC 2 Type 2 certification, right? So would it alleviate all these problems, right? So that's where initially we knew that we had to get ISO certification, but it's not an easy thing, right? So like again, Daniel pointed, you need to understand the process, understanding the process itself. And then I think I didn't have any experience at all. Like, how do you even get this certification in place? There are different departments that need to come together, not just the engineering department, and different policies and procedures have to be in place. You need to have a lot of documents also in place. You need to have a lot of softwares and tools also in place, which can make you compliant. And more importantly, you need to have the right team in place to get these things done, right? So I think overall, I mean, today we are ISO, I would say 27001 compliant, and we are in the process of SOC 2 Type 2. And personally, I can say that it's not an easy thing, where first only we had a head of security coming into our team. Then we were able to move all those things towards the right direction. And then he was able to help us get the certificates in place, or certification in place, right? And I think it requires a team where you need to have an IT team, you need to have a properly a SOC ops team, and you need to also have an AppSec team. Probably one person can look at all these things, but you need to look at all these departments, and you need to have a lot of documents as well, starting from finance to HR to your probably some places in marketing as well. It sounds weird, but all of the teams are involved in all these certifications, right? So no one is excluded. But again, having a proper platform to manage all your documents, and where you can answer to your customers, and where all of the I would say team members inside your company can go and understand what are these certifications about, what are the different configurations that are present, and how can you download certain documents, and how can you easily understand the posture of MoEngage regarding these certifications, whether it's GDPR, are you GDPR compliant, ISO compliant, or SOC 2 compliant, right? So that's where I think we are started using Drata for this, and then that has helped us a bit. And we just onboarded Drata, I would like 2 to 3 months back. I think we are yet to see the full potential of it in our system, but I could already see how it's going to help us in a lot of places. Yeah, that's a brief I can tell about our compliance journey. Obviously, I've given a very 20K feet view. I haven't even delved into whatever. I mean, I could say that the audit process was a 3-day process, at least for the ISO, and then the team had to spend straight, I would say 72 hours only taking break to sleep. Otherwise, it was all meetings throughout the day for all the teams, and security team actually had to stretch throughout those many hours. But yeah, the compliance is not an easy thing. Just wanted to end with that process. Yeah, but at least it will be worth at the end. I think you will feel a lot more secure and safe after you are reach that end point. I think it's a good journey to have.
Thank you, Yash.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
No, it's fine. We would like to hear the story from you also, Jay. You have built a robust platform, and of course, the security of the platform, making that it must be a nightmare. So would love to hear your journey as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Devlina. I reflect so much to the story what Yashwanth spoke about, that the good old days 10 years back. I think I'm going to touch upon 4 or 5 different problem sets what we faced. Some of you would have already overcome that. But if somebody was not, maybe there is some learning or takeaway from that. I'm going to probably start with a quick story, because we reflect so much to that story that, how does an eaglet learn to fly? Typically, an eagle pushes the eaglet from the cliff, and in the process of falling down, it flaps his wings and then lift it up, right? I think we were pushed into security and compliance even before we were baptized. Why? Because we started as a telecom VAS company, and we were audited by the Big Four, not once, multiple times in a year, right? And typically they have a scorecard. So they maintain a partner scorecard and look at who is doing better than the other one, and so on and so forth. And then typically who are on the bottom of the pyramid is pulled up by the CISO for a conversation. So we were always on the toes from the time we started our journey, right? But then the challenge for us was to sort of, we didn't want the perfect to come in the way of good enough, right? So what we thought was good enough was not really, perfect for somebody else, right? So, and for a startup, there are 3 Ps, which is always the most wanted, which is your productivity, you want your pace, and you want your plasticity, right? So that are the three key things for any company, and you don't want to compromise on that. So, and that's when the whole deliberation started. How do we sort of ensure that your productivity and the pace and other stuff is not compromised, yet you're sort of complying to the security and the compliance at large, right? So we started small. We started probably picking up the lowest thing in the architecture and started defining small processes. What we effectively done was that we sort of created a visionary framework on top of it. It may or may not comply to the ISO standards and so on and so forth, but then it was sort of helping us to elevate from where we started, right? And in the journey, something we did very good was we sort of created the accountabilities sort of overlapping. As such, we were a bunch of 10, 12 people, but then we ensured the fact that the responsibilities sort of crossed across, or shared across. And then you created a decent program to incentivize people, sort of make a security a way of life or a compliance a way of life. Challenging, but then that was a good start, for us to do. A couple of years went by, we realized the fact that there is something fundamentally wrong, which was our problem statement 2. The problem statement 2 was people were more working towards a checklist process and not a check sheet process. So what does that mean? A checklist is a process which you do typically for a compliance standpoint. You tick, have you done all these things? Am I good? But check sheet is where you look at the data a little more holistically. How are we evolving? How's your improvement? Are you meeting the ROI and so on and so forth, right? So we've sort of looking at that, and the realization was that, you probably have to look at a little more holistically, because otherwise you tend to remain within the comfort of a checklist, because all you wanted to do is get your compliance done, be happy with the auditors and the telcos and so on and so forth, right? I read this story during those days. I read this that typically for the mountain climbing, the 80% of the death happens when you climb down. What does that goes to say? Because you do a lot of planning for climbing up, but you don't do enough planning for climbing down. I sort of validated that with a teammate of mine who is an avid runner. So he ran this Karthungala challenge. I don't know how many of you heard of it, but that's the highest motor road in the world, which is higher than the base camp of Mount Everest. So I asked him how was the whole experience, and he still works with me. He said running up was probably the easiest thing. So this is about 150 kilometers you need to run over a period of 75 hours, right? He said running up was the most easiest thing, but running down was the challenging. I mean, goes to say, you do a lot of preparations how to run, but you probably don't do that full circle, right? So that sort of left us thinking aloud, what more we should do? Is that good enough? How do we look at it holistically, actually, right? So that's when we came up with another 3 Ps. The first 3 Ps, which was your productivity, pace, and plasticity. Second 3 P was password, privilege, and patch, right? How do I bring in a better password management system? How do I set privileges? Because it's all, we are a small set of people, doing a lot of dual tasking, cross-functionally, right? But how do you still create a better privilege system so that you're not taken by surprise, actually? And then the last one was patch. Anything it comes on your way, patch. Whether it's laptop, desktop, there was a fun crack in the office saying that even if somebody new come to the office, catch hold of him, patch him, So patching was a part of our invariably our, as in to sort of evolve, to make systems better and so on and so forth. But then, while we continue to build from there, Another challenge, and as we started growing, we were operating close to about 28 countries across the globe. You name the largest telcos in Africa and stuff that we were doing it over there. That's when the sensitivity a little more got increased, saying that, not only your telco, but in your partner ecosystem is looking at your compliance level, right? Because there is a lot of content getting shared. I mean, the fundamental problem those days was, even today is the content scraping, the content crawling. There are a lot of issues all of us battle on, especially on the consumer internet side of it, actually, right? So I think that sort of pushed us to look at the piece a little more larger and then go towards our ISMS structure and getting ourselves into the journey, getting us certified. I think we got certified way back in 2012. And then sort of creating that goal, the VAPT, risk assessment, and all of the stuff aligned to that to sort of evaluate ourselves, where do we look from an overall security standpoint, right? And I think it also helped us to understand our strength and weakness, which is very critical, because that weak spot sometimes could be your nightmare at some point in time, right? So
Yes, I agree, Jay. That's what we were discussing the other day even. And I think there is some interesting comment on the story you were saying also. I'm sure that Daniel is relating to that way more. So Daniel, yes, over to you again. What is your view?
I'm on mute. I put in some fun little chats in the chat there. Before we even dive in, it was just funny hearing Jai the quick security tool. Just go to security headers, put in your website and see how you do. That's like one of the easiest first things you can do. But let's actually dive in a little bit about how do we kind of view this process that maybe is hard, that maybe is meticulous, and that you need check sheets for. So I did the same thing in a small business and a big business. And again, the gears kept turning in my engineer head, and we said, hey, how can we automate this? And so kind of where it starts is, what are you kind of going after and why? So as you look at these certain compliance frameworks, ISO 27001, which many of you maybe have heard, SOC 2, it's more of an American standard, but becoming a very broad standard across the world. HIPAA in the health space, PCI in the payment industry. I'm sure all of you over the past few years have heard GDPR out of the European Union, and now certain states and countries are doing their own privacy, kind of flair on top of GDPR. In California, CCPA is a big one. So let's actually dive in a little bit about ISO 27001. And kind of the big reason why I say that is this one applies to global markets the most. ISO, as you guys know, is an international standard. And I think the ISO and the SOC 2 report are very, very similar. If you were to go to any any security lead and they said, hey, let me see your ISO cert, and you provide them with the SOC 2 report or vice versa, I think we would be okay with that. So ISO is really a design system for your information secure management system, or in short, ISMS, which is a long set of things to do. We're not going to go into that now, but essentially it's a way to manage a very secure process and business of your company. So it's a certification around how are you managing your ISMS. What's really great is it does cross map to other frameworks. So if you were to go after your ISO certification, you're going to be X% already do a HIPAA compliant or a SOC 2 report, or things like that. And I would say one of the biggest things about ISO compared to some other ones, it is very prescriptive. It's a certification. Unlike SOC 2, that's not as prescriptive. It's a little bit more left up to you on how you want to do it and how deep do you want to get a SOC 2 report. So there's a little difference and a little nuance there, but the good news is when you step back and you look at the cross mapping of either, they're very similar and there's a lot of overlap. But let's kind of look a little bit about how does Drata think about automation? How do we solve this compliance problem, and how do we save you time in your company? So what we do is we really provide visibility within even minutes of the deployment, where we're able to pull in all that information and show you a quick overlap of your posture of security in your company. And the question would be is how do we do this? Is we have all these integrations with these popular cloud tools. So roll back 15 years, Amazon or AWS doesn't even exist. Tools like GitHub, I don't think they were around 15 years ago. Things like that. The cloud has really taken off in 15 years, especially even within the past 5 to 10. And what we do is we go out to these integrations, GitHub, Google, Jira, even your background check providers, your HR providers, and we go out and we ask these systems questions. I'll give you one before I dive in. So I can go to AWS as example, and once I get proper connections, I can go on the API and I say, hey, AWS, tell me all of the databases that are not encrypted. And that returns a list, and I can understand and mark something as compliant or not. Let me go back here. But we built a platform to really handle the process in entirety. And so what we wanted to kind of end with here was we are customer obsessed here at Drata. I always have been in all of my companies. I think that's where I would say some of the success has come in my career. Is a great example is Plixie, that photo sharing company we built. Whether you like it or not, photos being on Twitter is probably my doing. So sorry if you don't like that. But even in that giant B2C company we built, where in the early days of Twitter, when we were the ones putting pictures on that, we had 40+ million users around the world. It was amazing. We had our personal phone number on the homepage for 40+ million users. People would call it here or there, but I think that was the point, is I wanted to hear from every customer. I wanted to make the experience the best. And the same goes at Drata, is that we hold customers at the center. I mean, Yash is already here and a testament to that. I think also the key here is that Drata, maybe a lot of you are B2B founders and CTOs and executives, but it's not just for B2B. While it definitely stands out in the B2B world, the B2C world is just as important. Again, these are frameworks to run your business in a very, not only secure way, but a very mature way. And so, here's just a great quote that I can leave with. So Jonathan Jaffrey's the CISO at Lemonade. They're a B2C company. They're based out of Israel. They sell insurance. And, it hasn't just been the B2B players that have really enjoyed and really need to focus on the space. I think everyone needs to focus. If you have data in the cloud, which 99% of online companies do now, you should be SOC 2 or ISO certified. So I will pass it back to Devlina.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Daniel. I'm going to ask Jyoth to just anchor the question and answer sessions, which we can move on to now.
Yeah.
I think some folks shared some in the chat window as well.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Daniel, Yashwanth, and Jay, for this actually enriching session. I could really feel how easy it is to kind of get these reports and integration and everything up and running with that real example that you showed, right? So one of the questions that we have is, when you work with agencies, you have folks at the agencies help you out with a lot of these processes, right? And when you work with Drata, how much prior knowledge do you require around these frameworks and other things to get started? Do you kind of need an in-house expert for this, like you have, or you can get started even like without any in-house expert?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to just apologize. I wasn't sharing my screen after the quick demo. It was, and we can share out the slides. Devlina will help, but it was essentially just a quick screen of Jonathan Jeffrey over at Lemonade and a quote from him. I apologize. But yeah, that's a great question. So we have startups, from 2-people startups that have never done this before on Drata, all the way up to multi-thousand person publicly traded companies on Drata. And what I love is, for those bigger companies, I love that it's a tool for those compliance teams to help them save time. They have, maybe a 2 to 5 person compliance team. Drata is the tool to help them save time and automate a lot of this piece. For the younger companies, the 2 to 50, 100 person companies, where they've never done any of this before, they don't even know where to start, but their sales leader is maybe saying, I need an ISO cert. I need to try to close this $100,000 deal. And their hair's on fire and they're yelling at the CTO. And, we get those customers every single day. And the purpose of Drata, what it does there is it holds your hand through the process. you don't need to know the first thing about cybersecurity, these certs, is that the not only your dedicated CSM is here to help, we have on-staff expert compliance experts, individuals that have done over 500 audits themselves in their career. And it'll walk you through there. Even within 5 minutes, it will show you exactly your checklist, what to do in that monitoring. Hey, your S3 bucket is open to the world. Hey, you're not monitoring X. Hey, people can, this individual can have write access to your code base. Are you sure? This person doesn't even work for you anymore, yet they have access to your code base, et cetera, et cetera. So it really walks you through that process and then gathers all the evidence and really shows you the readiness for when you're ready to go talk to the auditor and go do it.
Cool. Thank you, Daniel. Another question that has come up is, how much time does it take to get onboarded, and like what's the process for the whole onboarding to kind of happen?
That's a great one. So in terms of onboarding, so you'll have an implementation kickoff call with the CSM. You can get all of your stuff connected on that call. I mean, it's very simple matter of clicking a button and granting an OAuth scope, or AWS and some tools are a little more complicated where you have to create a role, but still, 5-10 minutes max to connect all that stuff. Once those connections are done, it is up to you on how fast you want to get your policies reviewed and distributed to your employees. I've seen people do it within a week. On average, I've seen it kind of, a lot of people inside of a company want to go back and communicate and meet. And so kind of sometimes I've noticed it takes about 1 to 2 weeks to get your policies, your about 20 to 30 policies all lined up and ready to go and approved. And at that point, you distribute, you invite your employees in. And from there, they review the policies, they take their cybersecurity awareness training. If you've never done background checks before, usually you can kick those off. We have tons of integration partners there. And kind of once that's up and done, that might take 2 to 3 weeks. And from there, in that process in parallel, you're working, maybe the security team or the engineers are looking at the exceptions on the monitoring page, resolving them, obviously based on your own timelines and just availability of engineers. Maybe you have to tweak some Terraform code. If you do it manually, go and check some boxes on GCP or AWS or whatnot, and get everything into a green state. And from there, you sync up with the auditor. The audit period, it depends on the auditor and your complexity of your company. I've seen it usually take 2 to 3 weeks though. And so kind of that whole process, I think the fastest I've ever seen it get done is 3 to 4 weeks, even to point of certification. That team though was on it. But I think usually it's maybe 6 to 8 weeks in a normal cycle where everyone has other things going on in meetings and progressions in your own roadmaps. That's where I've kind of seen the trend.
Got it. Perfect. Another question for Yashwanth and Jay, right? Is to how does a startup think about structuring their security teams? Like, when does the startup think that you should have a role like a CISO, and when should you have like a central security team and kind of each pod having that security engineer in that pod? So how does one think from like a seed to a Series CD level, and what's the progression?
I would say the time is now to start thinking about it. It's never too late to start thinking about security. If you, especially, I would even say for the younger teams, if you have a breach in your company, that could end your company. You're trying to fight for product market fit, and if your competitors are fine and growing, and you have a breach, like you're going to lose trust with your customers and potential customers. So in the effort of when do you start, the answer is now. But at what stage should maybe I get a CISO or a security team? Maybe you don't need an actual executive. I think that depends on every company and the technology expertise in-house. If you have a more technical founder, or there's a CTO on staff, and based on their availability, maybe they can spend some of their time, especially with a tool like Drata, to kind of just kind of obfuscate that time a little and automate most of it. If I would say probably like Series A and above is where I would start looking towards at least a dedicated security engineer, if not someone in charge of the program. I mean, it definitely depends. For us, we hired a CISO earlier than most. I mean, we're in this business, so we wanted to just be at the top of the bar for everything. Not only for our customers, not only for the internal security of our own business, but then as we talk with companies like yourself, you know, we can bring on Ross is his name, our CISO, on the calls and answer some of your very low level security questions. So to us, it was a little, you know, we're in a position where we needed to get a little earlier, but I think, you know, what I've seen in most companies around that Series A turn point to a Series B is when they'll hire a CISO.
Yeah, makes sense. Yashwanth, I would love to know learnings from your journey at MoEngage. How did you think about the whole security, team structure, posture, everything throughout these years?
Sorry, I was speaking on mute. So I think depends upon, I think it's my perspective, whether you are a B2B company or a B2C company. B2B companies should definitely start from day one, is from my experience that I think about. And I mean, if you have a technical co-founder or like most of your CTOs, so you always start with your login, creating a login page, and whether your password is hashed or not, right? So that's where you start with your security practice from there, and then you go about doing a bunch of things from there. I think for B2C, I think it's more about application security, and DevSecOps is where I think they can first establish. I think for a B2B company, it's more about controls from, I think, in IT team or InfoSec team is where they can get started with. I think IT team can come in later as well, but InfoSec team is something that should be in place, which would bring awareness to all the people inside the company about what should be the, I would say, practices that needs to be followed, right? So, but otherwise, I think somewhere down the line of, let's say, after 20 people, you don't know who will be doing a mess up of, like I think Daniel pointed out, people are the entry most of the times to data breaches, right? So after 20 people, you can't even judge who is doing what, or you don't have comfort level. I think after that, you should start putting some practices and having some engineers in place. Like I said, depends upon, again, my point of view for a B2B company, I think we can start with InfoSec awareness and team, and then having one security leader is must, at least to fill the forms and then send it back, and then educating the teams in general. But B2C, it's more about your internal comfort, right? If you, I mean, data is important for everyone, but I think how, I mean, it's also important for B2B, but B2C is more exposed. Your customers never ask your certification, right? But B2B, they will ask. For B2C, it's more about you have to have that integrity that, okay, it's my customer data, I have to protect it. There are, again, these days courts where they will levy hefty fines on you if you are not GDPR compliant or CCPA compliant, right? So for them, I think they should be more compliant with these laws, and obviously data residency laws, and also with your, I would say, application security as well. So I think that is where I think I would say a bit more different. I think CISO, formal CISO or properly VP of security is something that might come after Series C or something, where you can afford some good money to get that person on board, and I think that person will come in and then put different teams in place. That's exactly has happened. What has happened to us. Otherwise, we were a 2 to 3 member security team doing a lot of things with very small team even before that. So that's how I would like to put my journey as.
Makes sense. Perfect. Jay, I would love to hear your thoughts on your journey as well. And also, I guess there is another question that I'll put to the panel. Like, yes, Jay, you can also answer it. Like, how do you make sure your internal services are correctly matched? Basically, your payment service cannot talk to some other service, right? Like, that's the second part of the question. Like,
yeah, I think I'll reflect on what Yashwanth said. I think for a B2C, it also depends upon the scale in which you operate. I mean, I think probably for the first 5 years, it was pretty okay for us to have an internal small huddle team. But today, we manage close to about 400 million monthly active user base on the platform. You know, we run more than 10,000 plus VMs. My bandwidth consumption on the public cache is close to about 100 petabyte every month. So when you sort of operate in that scale, it's imperative that you need to have a fairly structured organization built in place. but it's still debatable as CISO or the right talent there. What I've also seen, especially with Saket would know this more, but from the investor community and so on and so forth, there has been a consistent ask on the leadership representation on the security. It's just not about your certification, it's about your ESG. There are multiple factors which is coming into picture, So I think clearly to do with the scale of operations, like I said, for us, it was absolutely fine. The first 5-6 years, I could probably manage it well within. But today I run a team, somebody who is a ISO lead practitioner who works with me for certification and compliance and so on and so forth. But I do have somebody who represents the Zero Trust Committee US. It is by invitation. So there is one of my team member as a part of that committee who helps us in our the whole perimeter security and building up our all-road security posture actually. So I think it depends upon the scale in which you operate is my take.
Got it. Perfect. On the second part of the question, which is I guess one of the last questions, is like, how do you kind of, for internal data, right, internal services talk to each other, how do you make sure, is it required to kind of expose that as well in reports, like which service is talking to which other service and what is allowed and not allowed?
Indeed, that's even surprising. So just to go a little back, there was a time these audit compliance institutes come and ask you to share the artifacts. I've seen a stage where they're talking about give access to your environment, we'll do our own assessment, right? I think things are considerably changing, right? So I think that warrant us to sort of do our own assessments of VAPT and stuff like that. What you can do is we can start with using some of the open source technologies like Nessus and stuff like that to sort of elevate you to a certain level before we start engaging with a third party organization. Now, because you need to reach certain level of maturity before you do that. But to answer your question, do you need to have it? It is 100% you have to have it. And like I said, it was just not internal anymore. Now it's actually external. There are people asking for you to share your, not just the audit done by a British Standard Institute or a Big Four, but it is also to share your internal audit reports and so on and so forth.
Got it. Just on this final question, would love Daniel's take on this.
Just talking about like what needs to be ready and internal kind of systems. Yeah. So I think what you'll notice is if you go out to big auditing firms, they're going to try to sell you on a assessment, like a pre-assessment. So kind of like a pre-audit, and it's it's great if you don't have anything in place, if you've never done this before. Why not go to the company that's going to do the audit for you to ready you for the audit? So I mean, there are definitely different units within that company that do that, but they know the practices and they know what they're looking for. So those are great offerings, but those are going to cost, I don't know, anywhere between $10,000 and $50,000 based on the depth of scope of those. And so that eats into your budget a lot. And that's where, again, I saw that's like it's good. It's human capital. I understand why it's expensive. But if you can use software and automate a lot of that part, right, where we can understand, are your network ports open, or do you have certain assets you didn't even know about running and not encrypted, and et cetera, et cetera. I think we can catch a lot of that from day one. I think having then there's certain artifacts along the way. Do you have your network diagram? Do you understand how data is flowing in and out? Do you understand your services? Do you understand, just who has access to what? It's like access management. Have you done a pen test on your company? Do you do vulnerability scanning? So the list goes on. And I think by having a tool that we essentially try, in a way, we're trying to replace that pre-audit, and we're trying to get you ready for the audit and show you that state of readiness. So that's how I think about it, is let's replace the human. I mean, sorry to all the humans out there that are doing that as their job, but let's automate that part. And so we can kind of get back faster to doing what we do and building amazing products. That's kind of how I think about it.
Perfect. I think so. We have all the questions answered. I'll hand back to Dave and Rashmi.
I think Prashant has a question. Prashant, you're on mute.
Thanks, Saket. Folks, one thing, the sense I get is that this is an assist for me to be able to get my systems in order. But I was wondering if there is an ecosystem, and I think one of the questions did allude to it. Like if I take a report out of the system and directly give it to one of the certification authorities, would it be recognized? Or would there be further questions? And I mean, the easiest way, I mean, there are multiple parts to the certification process. One is getting my house in order. And the other part is that, hey, if I click a button, all your reports directly go to the certification authority. Oh, it comes from Drata, check, and I'm done. I know it's a pipe dream, but maybe eventually. But that's what I'm trying to get to. How much is it recognized by the authorities?
Yeah, that's a great one. Yes, auditors accept our evidence, and we actually do. Josh, I think he's on the call here, and others on my team. We do an excellent job at cultivating those relationships across. I think we have now upwards of 60 to 100. I've lost count on my side, but up to 60 to 100 different auditing partners around the world. That we train them on Drata. We show them how we get the data. We show them, because if I'm an auditor and I'm saying, okay, this tool Drata is like giving me this data, how do I trust Drata? How did they do it, right? So not only did we decide to go get our own cert, hopefully within the community, they can trust that we're doing the right thing by having our own SOC 2 report. We are actually working on our ISO cert in the middle of it right now. But the interesting thing about SOC 2, just to focus there a bit, there's actually 5 layers to it. And there are these trust service criteria. And we went all the way down to actually doing, I think we did 4 of the 5. But the most important part is the part where we actually showed our audit professionals how we actually do the work. So it's not just that, hey, here's some evidence and here's some reports that we do what we say we do. I actually got on many, many phone calls, probably upwards of 8+ hours, showing them our code, showing them how we go out to GitHub or AWS or whatnot, how the data comes in, how we assert it, how we go through the life cycles of that. And so that, a layer is really help build the trust within our audit. So then in the community, that these auditors at EY, at Deloitte, at others trust our system. So in terms of do they accept it, it's definitely, I would say, on us as a company to educate the auditing community at large and companies out there on what Drata does, why we think the evidence we're providing is suitable for their certification process. And I would say we actually try to stay away from the auditors that just want to do a certification mill, and they just, oh, you use Drata, check the box, I didn't even look at anything and go. Like, that's not the purpose of this. I don't want you to just get the cert to get the cert. I want you to get the cert because your company is secure and compliant and following the practices. So, are there companies out there and auditors that might just say, oh, you're using one of these automation tools? Check. I'm sure there are. We don't partner with those. Now, at the same time, the ones we do, they understand the process, they understand the evidence that comes from Drata, and the time savings is unbelievable. We've heard from time and time again from auditors, they're like, this even saved us 2 weeks off of the top because of the back and forth of just getting policies, like just communication and emails and whatnot. They can log in. So that's something I didn't show everyone, but there is an auditor side to Drata where you can invite them in. You completely control what access they have, what type of audit, what's the time period of data. And when they log in and see data from your account, because you provided access to them to do that, they can see the policies, any reports. They can hit the button and a random sampling based on the parameters that you set in that time window will download it and be included in the zip file. So they don't see what you see. They don't see the ins and outs and the dirty details of 5 months ago I was failing and now we fixed it and it's good. It is a good thing. If you want to, you can invite them in. We're not going to block you from that. They can view in a read-only fashion. But a lot of times what happens is you invite the auditor for, say, an ISO cert between this time period. And when they go in, they can download what they need and the data that they can get and the evidence, it's a random sampling throughout that period. So it really aligns to how they do audits if they were doing them by hand, but it speeds it all up with automation. And so they just log in, hit the button, they get a zip file. It's perfectly organized to every single certificate, to the ISO spec and how it maps over to your business controls, and just saves so much time for them. So it's been a great relationships with the auditors up there.
Great. Thanks, Daniel. I think that answers my question. I was always wondering there should be an auditor side. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. I think we're at time. So I'd just like to say a couple of closing words. First of all, thank you very much to all of you for having joined us. And also special thanks to Daniel for having taken out the time to have this conversation and walk us through the Drata journey. Also, many thanks to Yash and Jay for having told us a little bit about MoEngage and Daily Hunt's journeys to security and compliance. Thanks, Saket, as well, for facilitating this conversation. And thank you all for your insightful questions. Thank you all very much once again for your time.